Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of South Cambridgeshire District Council Scrutiny Overview Committee. My name is Councillor Stephen Drew. I am chair of the committee. May I make a few housekeeping announcements? Those present, including any members of the public observing or any public speakers, are asked to note that this meeting is being filmed and live streamed. By your presence, you are deemed to have consented to be filmed and to the use of those images and sound recordings for a webcast. May I please remind members that when speaking they should not disclose any personal information of any individual, as this might infringe the rights of that individual and breach the Data Protection Act. Please make sure your microphones are switched off unless you're invited to speak. For those participating remotely, when you're invited to address the meeting, please make sure your microphone and camera are switched on, and then when you finish addressing the meeting, please turn your microphone off again. Please, when members who are attending remotely indicate a wish to speak through a chat message in the Teams meeting. Those present in the chamber should indicate their wish to speak by raising their hand. I will ask the Vice Chair to note the order of speakers both virtually and in the room. Committee members present, I will now invite each of you to introduce yourselves. Members, after I call your name, please introduce yourself and say which ward you represent. As I said earlier, my name is Councillor Stephen Drew and I am one of the members for Camborne. My Vice Chair is Councillor Graham Cone. And I am one of the members for the Fen Ditton and Fulbourn ward. Councillor Paul Bearpark.
Thank you, Chair. I am a member for Milton and Waterbeach. I'm substituting for Councillor Rippeth.
Thank you. Councillor Sue Ellington.
Good afternoon. My name's Sue Ellington. I am a member for Swavesey ward.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peter Fane.
Evening, Peter Fane, Shelford ward.
And Councillor Sally Ann Hart.
Thank you, Chair. I'm one of the members for the Melbourne ward.
Councillor James Hobro.
Good evening, Chair. I'm James Hobro. I'm the member for Foxton ward.
Councillor Helen Leaming.
Good evening. I'm Helen Leaming. I'm one of the members for Camborne ward.
Councillor Richard Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Richard Stobart. I'm one of the members for Girton ward. That includes the villages of Dry Drayton and Madingley.
Councillor Aidan van der Weer.
Hello, I'm Aidan van der Weer. I represent the villages of Barrington ward.
And Councillor Heather Williams.
Evening, Chair. Heather Williams. I represent the Mordens ward and I'm substituting for Councillor Bygott.
We also have Councillor Bunty Waters present.
Good evening, thank you. Bar Hill ward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I'm Councillor Anna Bradnam and I'm one of the three members for Milton and Waterbeach ward.
My apologies, Councillor Bradnam. I did not realise your hand was up because I'd missed you out completely. I must confess I was thrown by the fact that Councillor Bearpark substituting meant you weren't first on the list today. And I thought very carefully about it as he was speaking and then decided to ignore you. I do apologise. Thank you very much. I believe we have some Cabinet members present. So, Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor John Williams. I am the lead Cabinet member for Resources and I'm also one of the members for Fen Ditton and Fulbourn ward.
Councillor Brian Milnes.
Evening, everybody. Brian Milnes, Deputy Leader and member for Sawston ward.
And Councillor John Batchelor.
Evening. Just trying to get the camera working. I don't know. Right, okay. Yeah, John Batchelor, member for Linton and Cabinet member for Housing.
Thank you very much. And based on my faux pas of missing Councillor Bradnam out earlier, can I just check there are not any more councillors present before I move on? Excellent, thank you very much. We also have a number of officers present. Liz Watts.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. Liz Watts, Chief Executive.
Peter Maddock.
Good evening. I'm Peter Maddock. I'm the Head of Finance.
Ian Senior.
Hello, I'm the Scrutiny and Governance Advisor.
Aaron Clark.
Sorry, Chair, I haven't registered the microphone for myself.
And Aaron Clark is present. There you are. Excellent. And Baudelaire Sam.
Good evening all, I'm Boreas, Head of Climate and Environment.
Thank you. And, okay. Buddy, I think it would be quite good if you turned your camera off. Yes, I was going to make that suggestion. That might be a good idea. And I think, looking up at the screen, Graham, I think that's everyone. No, I do apologise. Thank you very much. And Peter Campbell.
Best for last, Peter Campbell, Head of Housing.
Okay, this is not going very well. First of all, I ignored Councillor Bradnam, then I failed to see the person who is currently covering half the screen. I shall be trying harder from now onwards. Excellent, thank you very much. Okay, I can confirm that the meeting is quorate, there being at least 4 Scrutiny Overview Committee members here in the chamber. If at any time a member leaves the meeting, would they please make that fact known to me so it can be recorded in the minutes. Finally, a report of this meeting will be presented to Cabinet on the 20th of March, as neither Vice Chair nor I is likely to be at that meeting. Is there any other committee member willing to present that report? Councillor Stobart, we are looking in your direction as you have volunteered a number of times recently, but I see a shake of the head.
If you will, Chair, I'm unavailable on the 20th, and I'm sorry, but normally I would do it, and I will do that duty in the future too. But the 20th, I'm not available.
That's okay, no problem. Thank you very much for all the times you've done it in the past. Is there any other member present who would be able to represent the committee on the 20th of March? Okay. I shall move on, and Councillor Bradnam may come back to us on that. Excellent. So, item 2, apologies. Chair, are there any apologies? Are there any apologies for absence?
We've got apologies from Councillors Tom Bygott and Judith Repeth, and who are both committee members, and we also have apologies from Councillor Bridget Smith and Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And item 3, declarations of interest. Members are required to declare the existence and nature of any interest which affects or relates to any item of business to be considered. An explanatory note for councillors is included immediately after the agenda sheet. Councillor Williams. Sorry, Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. It's going to get really confusing. We're sat next to each other. Just that the Greater Cambridge Partnership is mentioned. It's only in the minutes, so I don't see it being an issue, but I am a member of the Assembly.
Thank you. Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm a director of both South Cambridgeshire Investment Partnership and South Cambridgeshire Projects, both of which are part of the investment strategy of South Cambridgeshire District Council. I've taken advice from the monitoring officer, and the advice is that I may participate in the discussion, but not engage in any vote or decision-making activity.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hobro.
Thank you, Chair. So through my membership of this council, I'm a non-executive director of Ermine Street Housing, and which is mentioned in the investment strategy. It's a part of the investment strategy. I've also, like Councillor Stobart, I've also consulted with the monitoring officer and been given the same advice, that I can participate in the discussion but should not take part in the vote.
Okay, thank you very much. Then other members, Councillor Fane.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a director of Shire Homes, which is not directly, not mentioned in this investment strategy, nor directly affected. I have not been advised I should not take part in the debate or the vote.
Thank you very much. Are there any other councillors who wish to raise a matter related to possible conflict of interest? Councillor Bradnam.
It's not a conflict of interest, but I can report to Cabinet if you wish.
Oh, thank you very much. Excellent. There we are. Timing was perfect. And if I could just ask Councillor Libby Earle to introduce herself to the meeting.
Libby Earle, Councillor for Sawston Ward.
Thank you very much. I do not see any other hands at this point. I do not see anything raised online, so we shall move on. So we have 3 sets of minutes that we need to go through, for we've had a number of meetings in a short window, as you can see, the 15th of December, the 12th of January and the 19th of January. So first of all, we shall raise the issue of the minutes of the 15th of December 2022. Councillor Leaming, I believe you have a correction to mention first.
I do, thank you, Chair. In the minutes it says that I attended the meeting remotely, but actually I was here in person. So if that could be corrected, please, that would be great.
Thank you very much. Is there any other councillor who wishes to raise any issue in relation to the minutes of the 15th of December 2022? No, in that case then may I ask by affirmation for the acceptance of those minutes? Thank you. The minutes of the 12th of January 2023. Do any councillors wish to raise anything in relation to that? Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. On page 11, I don't appear to be in the list of attendees. I was here in person and I am quoted in the minutes. So, yeah, if I could just be added to that list. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to raise anything in relation to the minutes of the 12th of January? In that case, can I ask for, by affirmation, the acceptance of those minutes? Thank you. And the third meeting in that period of just over a month was on the 19th of January 2023. Does any councillors wish to raise any point in relation to those minutes? No. In that case, then, can I ask by affirmation the acceptance of those minutes? Okay, thank you very much. Our fifth item on the agenda is public questions. We do not have any public questions for this meeting, which means we now move on to the three items which form the bulk of our agenda. Agenda item 6, the investment strategy, followed by agenda item 7, the Q3 performance report, and then agenda item 8, further support for cost of living crisis for South Cambridgeshire residents. It's obviously quite a meaty agenda. We are therefore seeking to run with approximately 45 minutes of time in the meeting per item. If you are speaking at 45 minutes, I will not stop you speaking. I will not say that we cannot have a bit more, but in general terms, I will make us aware that we're coming up to that point, and if we can seek to try as hard as possible to stick to that, that will still lead to us having a meeting which is still approaching 2.5 hours. So therefore a good use of our time, but we can be as efficient as possible. So in relation to the investment strategy, who would like to start us off with a point or a question, please? Councillor John Williams may be about to get the best evening.
Do you want me to introduce it?
If you wish to introduce it, Councillor Williams, you are welcome to do so. But obviously the paper was issued beforehand and members have had the opportunity to read, but we are more than happy for you to give some explanation if you wish to do so.
Well, I'll give a brief introduction then. The investment strategy clearly changes from the previous investment strategy as a result of the changes to the Public Works Loan Board rules. We have revised it so that there are now basically three types of investment. There's service investment, which includes social capital. There's commercial investment, regeneration, which we've produced a revised matrix, which you'll find on page 54. And then there's investment partnerships, and we have two, as you know, two investment partnerships, one with Hill and one with Balfour Beatty. The target income from these investments is from the service investments. We're looking at 2.5% return, and on commercial regeneration, we're looking at a 5% return. And one thing to clear up is that the changes to the Public Works Loan Board are not retrospective, so that we can continue with our purely commercial investments for yield, and can continue to, if we want to, increase the investments in those investments going forward. But any new investments will require us to be guided by the Public Works Loan Board rules. You might say, well, can't we borrow from other sources? Yes, we can, but the problem there is that once we do, we can't then use the Public Works Loan Board for loans. And the Public Works Loan Board continues to offer us the best interest rate, so we would be foolish not to take heed of their rules. So that's the main change to it, and Mr. Maddox and I are open to questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. So through you, a few questions really about the big picture. and perhaps two around risk, but the risk in the sense of what risk is the council prepared to take in order to balance investment and return, and how is that, in a sense, quantified and regulated? And then a related topic would be, what's the ethical framework in which the investment process operates? Now, that might be implicit. I may be asking a question out of turn here, but just a brief summary of the ethics. And would that include, for example, if through a pattern of investment, there was investment, say, in fossil fuel, some aspect of fossil fuel, would that be picked up as part of the process of evaluating an investment? So two things: risk, council's appetite for risk, and the ethical framework in which the investment process operates.
Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Well, on risk, we have a risk register. We also apply, as you see in the document, we also consider risk against each investment, and we have a criteria for that. And as I say, so far as commercial regeneration is concerned, we have the matrix, obviously against which we can apply risks. On the ethical side, of course, we are governed by the council's policies and the council's business plan. So whatever we do with regard to the treasury and investment strategies, they are guided by the policies of this council and by the business plan of this council. So we don't operate independent of those policies. So, you know, if it is a policy of this council not to invest in fossil fuels, then we will not invest in fossil fuels.
Okay. Do you want to, I see Peter, yes.
Yeah, just to say that Appendix 1, we've got the responsible investment policy there, so have a look at that, and that should outline, you know, the sort of approach we take. But obviously, with selecting particular investments, it goes through a fairly rigorous process anyway, which we can expand upon if necessary.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Heather Williams. Sorry. Councillor Stover, are you happy for me to move on that your questions have been answered appropriately?
Yes, I'm satisfied with those answers, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. My question is around page 54, in regards to the sort of track changes that have been put on for location and tenancy strength being reduced. I do get a sense of deja vu, Chair, because I know I've raised this previously when we've looked at different revisions. So I'm wondering if Councillor John Williams or perhaps Mr Maddox can just let us know where it was originally, because I know we've already stepped those down once before, and there was a bit of a debate around tenancy strength being a higher priority in the weighting factor. I'd sort of ask if Cabinet were minded to look at that again and increasing the tenancy strength, especially in the current climate, Chair, in the weighting factor and the scoring criteria.
Thank you. Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I think, as far as I was aware, this has been slightly altered as a result of comments that we have received in the past about the way we look at investments. I think we also have to take into account that things have changed in that we are now looking at commercial regeneration, not purely in commercial investment. And therefore, tenancy strength, when you come and look at commercial regeneration, is of a lesser importance in a way than it was in the past when we were purely looking at tenancy in order to provide us with an income. So I think you need to bear that in mind for that change, because clearly we could well find ourselves in a situation where we are investing in a property that doesn't have any tenants because it's in a very poor state and we want to bring it back into use. So, you know, therefore it has a little bit of a lower score than it would have had if we were just purely looking for tenants who were going to deliver us lots of cash.
Okay. Do you wish Peter Maddox to add anything to that, or do you wish to add anything to that, Peter?
Not sure I do particularly. I mean, the emphasis of the strategy is rather different to what it was. Obviously, it was really quite a key element when we were purchasing property for yield. But as Councillor Williams alluded to, it's more likely now that, you know, if we're regenerating a property, there may well not be tenants. I mean, certainly, you know, the investment properties that we've currently got, where we change, where there's a change in tenant, we'll obviously be looking at that because that's obviously very important for those properties. And I think that's obviously going to be a key element to those properties going forward. I tend to agree it's probably less important for things like our commercial regeneration, particularly where there aren't any sitting tenants.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. My first question about what the original scoring for those two were, because obviously it'd be interesting to see what it was when it was first initially set up. Because like I said, we have had a debate over the reduction of location tenancy in the past.
Yeah, so I think, sorry, John.
Are we going to want me to carry on with Peter?
I was just going to apologise. I'm afraid I don't have that information.
No, that's fine. I sensed by what was happening here and by you that I was carrying on here. So Peter or Liz, whoever is carrying on. Liz is definitely pointing at Peter.
So I can see it was 10 and it's changed to 8. Whether before it was higher than 10, I'd need to track back to the original version, but certainly from the previous iteration it's gone down to 8, but whether it was higher than that beforehand, I'd probably need to go back and check, if that's helpful, and see, because at some point it may have been higher than 10, but I can't recall without going back to the original document. So I'll make a note of that as an action to go back and look.
Okay, just to pick up on that as well, that when we started to look at investing beyond Ermine Street into other sectors, it was very important at that time that we had tenants that had a very good, you know, record, that were demonstrating already that they had a good ability to provide us with a good income. And so tenancy was very important in the early days. You know, the tenant was very important in the early days. Not so now with the change in emphasis.
Okay. Councillor Heather Williams, to go back to you, are you happy to move on at this point, or anything further you feel hasn't been answered?
Happy to move on, Chair, but would appreciate the offer that Mr Maddox made to look into the historical context of this.
I'm sure that's been noted both by Peter and by Ian, so that's fine. Next up is Councillor Cohn.
Thanks very much, Chair. Mine's just a very quick brief point on page 36 around training for officers and members, but mainly around training for members. I was just going to ask if, we think that the training is currently a good enough standard when we're making very difficult decisions around investment and risk, and should there be a set criteria around what training councillors should have undertaken when they are directly involved with making decisions on those investments?
Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Chair. That's a very good point, and it's very important, I believe, that members of this committee should be able to assess you know, the strength or otherwise of a particular investment opportunity, and therefore be able to make a decision accordingly. I mean, so far as I'm concerned, I've been to sit for training, etc., on this, and the investment governance board, which this goes to first before we make a recommendation. Members of that board are also given training. And I think in the past we have given training to members of this committee. Maybe, given that we have now basically a new committee, that we should do that again. I think that would be a very good idea.
Okay. Just 1 second. Can I just check? Councillor Fain, did I see your hand up a moment ago? I did. It's right. I've written your name down while Councillor Cohn was speaking. Where's your question originally come from you? So I'll come back to you first of all, Councillor Cohn. Are you happy for us to move on that?
I am, Chair. Thanks very much.
Okay, I've got Councillor Fane and then Councillor Heather Williams and then Councillor Stobart. Councillor Hobart, did I see your hand as well? Yes. So Councillor Fane.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor John Williams referred to I think in relation to the PWLB rules principally, the 3 different categories of investment, including investment partnerships outlined at number 4, page 49. I wondered how the green energy projects at 5 on page 50 would be assessed for the purposes of target yields, bearing in mind that they can be either service and can, for instance, deliver returns in terms of reduced costs, or they can be commercial. And also the rates of return can vary quite markedly with very little notice in response to changes in government policy and support and so on.
Councillor John Williams.
Well, if unless they're part of a regeneration package, then I think we would be looking at those types of investments as a service investment. You know, either delivering our residents a better grid capacity or enabling us to, as with this building, you know, use our assets better and in order to get better energy efficiency for our assets. So we wouldn't be investing in, we would be allowed now, if we were going to go down the Public Works Loan Board route, we wouldn't be allowed simply to invest in green energy for yield. We just wouldn't be able to do that. So it was either would be as social capital, or it would be for regeneration.
Is there anything to add, Peter, on that? Or?
Yeah, I think I did ask the PWLB directly about this point because obviously it was of interest to members, and their view was that it was fine as long as there could be some connection to the district and a benefit to the district. So, you know, if we were just to do it for yield, I think they would probably say no, but as long as we could demonstrate some sort of service element and benefit to the district, then they'd be happy with that.
Okay. Councillor Fane, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. There are some current developments, for instance, in wind energy. It is possible that there will be further investments or renewed investments in onshore wind, including possibly in community turbines. Just an example of the sort of investment which could be directly linked to this area, could be relevant to PWLB, but could be both service or commercial in nature. I mean, maybe that is just a mixed category.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fane, should we take your final bit there as more of a point rather than a question? Unless Councillor John, yeah. And in that case, then can I just check that you're happy for us to move on, that your questions have been answered, Councillor Fane? Okay, so next up is Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. This was just following on from Councillor Cohn's question, and what might be helpful to know is we had finance a SIPFA training, which was very good. We had a day of that. That was in July 2018, and we also had in November 2018 commercialisation training, which, if you remember the workshops and what have you, I think Alex Collier, so that's quite some time ago. And they were, I thought, very beneficial, and perhaps we could look at revisiting that. But I would stress it should be for all members and open to all members, because, of course, these decisions come to full council. So can I stress that there should be a training plan attached, and it should be for all members.
Thank you. And next up is Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. So this question is kind of not centred on, but we can start off with section 6 of the main report on page 36, governance arrangements. My question concerns the pipeline of investment possibilities. So at some point, people are out there, as it were, beating the bushes, looking for investment possibilities, thinking them through, and presenting them to council. And I think Section 6 gives a nice summary of the structures in place, in a sense, to receive and then process, analyse and put forward investment possibilities. But my question's really around the pipeline process. Are we sure, for example, that what's summarised in paragraph 6.2 is strong enough, particularly where there is such a competition for possibilities of investment? Is that pipeline, maintained? Is it documented? Is there a kind of proper process for slimming it down or asking questions? Why isn't it fuller? Why aren't there more things? So, sorry, I'm a little perhaps simplistic in the approach. I'm thinking about a sales process, but actually there's probably a lot of analogy between attracting investment and processing it through until there is a proper project in place. So I think for us to summarise this as a question, what is the nature of the pipeline that, in a sense, connects the ideas that are out in the wider world and those things which become really serious propositions for South Cambridgeshire District Council to invest in? And what are the numbers, and that could be a bit of an abstract thing, what are the numbers associated with each stage? Do we have to be getting like 20 possibilities to get down to one which is suitable? What kind of ratios are operating in that sector? So I hope that's enough of a question, or there's enough substance for a question there.
Thank you, Councillor Stobart. Councillor John Williams.
Can I ask, Liz, I think, is going to answer that.
Liz Watts.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I'm subbing for Anne Ainsworth today, who leads on the investment strategy. And I think it's probably useful to understand the history here, Councillor Stobart. So, pre the PWLB rules changing, the council had identified £340 million worth of investment and was looking at significant investment in commercial property for commercial income. And at that point, we had quite a big pipeline in terms of commercial property being put forward to us by agents, and that pipeline went through the process in the appendix here with the grid and the scoring and so on, and went through the process of investment strategy and investment governing boards. Things have really changed since then, and what we're really looking at investing now is much more local projects where the chances are we may even be involved in the project. So if you look at, for example, North Stowe, it may be that we're investing in the enterprise zone there, the renewable energy project in the depot, which, we don't own the site, but obviously we're working closely with the owner to carry out that renewable energy project. And so the pipeline is really different. Partly, I suppose it's driven by the change in rules, so we're doing different sorts of investment, which means that we have less money to invest, and it's much more local. We also have the business support team, which is a team of 4 people who are working on a daily basis with businesses, kind of small, medium and larger ones. And, they're specifically sort of empowered to look for potential investment where they would meet our investment criteria. So I guess areas where there's a kind of gap in the market where a business couldn't go to a bank, but we feel that there's a sort of solid reason to perhaps do a joint venture or to invest in a business which otherwise just wouldn't be able to happen. So the story, since I've been here in 3 years, has changed very, very radically, and therefore the pipeline and the way that it's generated has too.
Okay. Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you for the that description of the change of era, if you will. And I think some of the things we've been speaking about already in regard to why would you do projects, I think, I can see how that fits. So thank you for that. Well, we could probably dig deeper, but I think that's a very satisfactory point to reach in our understanding of how projects come into being. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hobro.
Thank you, Chair. So I had a question about section 8, the prudential indicators. And it's, if we go down to 8.4, where there's a table that shows the debt to net service expenditure ratio. So this is on page 40. Really, one small point, which is that it took a while for me to work out where the numbers in row B come from, commercial investments. I think they're the cumulative total of table 7.2, which outlines the amount being invested every year on top of the existing investments. That wasn't totally clear when I first looked at this table, but the real question I had was about row C in that table, the net service expenditure, which, as I understand it, represents the total expenditure of the council, so it's sort of size of the business, as it were. So the numbers there for 2023-24 are much larger than they are in the following 4 years. So it's running at about 22, 23 million in the subsequent years, but in this coming financial year, it's at 30 million. And of course, that jump affects all of the numbers in the next few sections, which are percentages that are as a percentage of that total. So my question really was, why is there such a drop in that number? What does it mean? And does it matter that it's jumping so much in terms of assessing these percentages that sort of follow from it?
Thank you. Councillor John Williams. Peter Maddox.
Yeah, so you're right. Row B is just simply adding our allocation on year. The net service expenditure for 23-24 represents what's currently in the budget. So that was the budget that was agreed last week, wasn't it? Yeah. And the figures that we show going forward are from our medium-term financial strategy. Now, I'm aware that the 30 million looks very different because of one or two of the items within the 23-24 budget. So I'd need to go back and check why that's such a big difference. One thing that we have been discussing and probably need to do a little bit more work on is, okay, so we've got a ratio there, but what does that actually mean? Is that good or is that bad? And I think probably what we need to do is do a bit of benchmarking with other authorities, see how we compare with others. Because the attempt of that ratio is to see, well, are our investments out of kilter with the size of the authority, because that's what it's trying to represent. And we probably need to do a bit more work around, well, okay, 806% in 2025-26, how does that compare with others? What I can say, it's significantly lower than what it was before. As Liz mentioned earlier, we were talking about a larger amount of investment, and consequently you had larger figures there, which we were looking at sort of 14 times. We're now looking at 8 times. So, on the face of it, it looks a bit more manageable. I don't think there was any problem with 14%, and I don't think there's any problem with sort of eight times. But what I would quite like to do is check it against other authorities, just to make sure that seems reasonable. To my mind, it seems reasonable, but I think it would be worth doing that extra piece of work just to see how that compares, particularly given some of the high-profile cases we've heard in local government in recent times.
Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to reassure the committee that we did do some benchmarking back in 2019 when we set out on a commercial investment. And at that time, what we were proposing was not out of step with what other local authorities were doing, but clearly we need to relook at that given the changes to the Public Works Loan Board changes, and also what has happened recently with some councils, thinking Thurrock, Woking and Spelthorne, where they have clearly overstretched themselves and have got into trouble with their investments. We're nowhere near what those authorities, the situation that those authorities are in, but it's worth looking at this again, given the change in circumstances. But I think, you know, you can see that we have rowed back on our investment plan for the coming 5 years, and therefore I'm pretty confident that you'll find that these figures are reasonable in comparison with other local authorities that are doing what we're doing of our similar size of us to us.
Okay. Peter again?
Yes, I've just had a look at our budget. Actually, there's an interesting point here, because there's our revenue contributions of capital are rather skewing the figures this year. So we have a 3 million contribution to capital from our revenue budget. Now that's not in future years, and when we get to 24-25 budget, we may well have a figure there. So actually, that is actually skewing the figure. So I'm actually thinking we probably strip that out in the numbers, if I'm honest. So thanks for raising that. We'll have a look at that.
Okay. Councillor Hobro, back to you.
So thank you very much. I mean, I think you've answered the question satisfactorily. Just my final point really, that my question was really about making sure that the figures are meaningful and that any trends that we see in there are meaningful trends. So I think, yeah, finding some way of estimating the net service expenditure without perhaps taking a literal figure to give a stable indicator perhaps would solve the problem. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay. Are there any other councillors who wish to ask a question in relation to this item at present? I do not see anyone else. In that case then, I suggest that we move on. Thank you, Councillor John Williams and Peter Maddox, for your responses and contribution on our first item there. I'm sure you'll be back again in the next one when we're going through the quarterly report. So that brings us to item number 7, which is the 2022-2023 Q3 performance report. So, sorry, Councillor Bradman?
Just a question, do we need to sort of say that we note it?
Yes.
Lovely.
You're quite right. In that case then, please, colleagues, are we happy to say that we note the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. I think I was a bit thrown by the fact that it didn't take 45 minutes. And in my head, it was just time to move on. Thank you, Councillor Bradman. Okay, so 2022-2023 Q3 performance report. So, colleagues, we have all had the reports. We've had the opportunity to look through. So, if I can ask councillors if there anyone who wishes to start us off with questions in relation to the Q3 performance report. Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to ask a question, please, about point AH211, which is on page 66 of our report. It's to do with reletting housing stock. So there's two questions that I would like to ask about this, really. I think we've mentioned this in the past, but I'm wondering whether the target of 17 days to relet the housing stock is realistic and whether we should review that as a target. And my second question is, there's a very good explanation in the comments about what's actually happened and the behaviour of tenants at the moment. It implies that it's taking longer to turn properties around. And if this is going to be a long-term trend, if this is something that's not just a one-off, if it continues, is this something that we should look at in terms of boosting the maintenance work that's happening in this area? So I understand that it's MEAs that are performing this maintenance work, but is this something that we should look at in terms of their contract to see whether they need any extra capacity?
So, Councillor John Batchelor in the first instance. I'm afraid to say, John, we are not being blessed with your dulcet tones. Thank you.
Yeah, first one. Okay, yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. You're absolutely right. The 17 days hasn't been achieved in any of the time I've been associated with housing. And we've recognised this and are reviewing the targets entirely, because this covers much too much activity. Is key to key, so it's when the keys are handed over and when the new person actually takes the keys to go in. So there's a huge deviation of what could or could not happen in between. So we're going to change this by breaking down the targets into its component parts, i.e. What has to happen immediately. We've taken over the property, i.e. the level of repairs and so on. And then the other key element is how quickly we can actually turn round the re-letting. So for the new financial year, there will be a new target figure and it'll be more precise and hopefully much more meaningful than the one we've got now. Thank you.
Do you wish me to go to Peter for anything to be added to that, or are you content that's done, John? Anyone wish to add? No. Yes, Peter, I wasn't sure if you wanted to add or not. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I just want to say, I mean, just to add to what John said, is that he's quite right in everything that he said, but this isn't something that we are being complacent about. What we do want to do is to we understand this is a trend that's happening nationally. Many organisations are finding that the re-let times are going up. But having said that, there are other organisations who are performing better than we are. What we want to do is to a number of things, to break down the information that, as Councillor Batchelor has mentioned, but also spend some time seeing what the best-in-class services are doing, to see what we can learn from elsewhere and what we can transfer back to district in order to improve our service.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Councillor Leaming.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful, actually. So when we see this in the next report, will there be a number of benchmarks? I'm just sort of looking at, it will be broken out into sections, so there'll be the time taken between turnaround, between a tenant handing their notice in, perhaps inspection time, then maintenance time. There'll be a number of separate measures. Is that?
Yeah, so what we're doing is that we'll look at breaking this down. So remember that the information you've got is Q3. So Q4 will probably come in as existing format, and we'll change it after that. What we're also doing is that this is obviously of concern to officers and also to our tenants. So we're working with the tenants groups as well and see what information that they want. So I'm not going to guarantee you now exactly what the format's going to be, but I can say that we are going to revise it much in the way that Councillor Batch has explained.
Okay, marvellous. Councillor Leaming. Sorry, Councillor Leaming.
And in terms of sort of reviewing the long-term trends, is this something that we are going to have to change how we operate or how we ask MEAs to work? If, for instance, we're seeing more tenants leaving properties which need major refurbishment works, if that's a long-term trend?
Again, it's something that we want to learn about a bit more before committing to this. Quite often, the properties that need work, extensive work carrying out, have been properties that have been occupied for a number of years by elderly people and people who've been in ill health for a number of years, and they've refused improvement works whilst they've been tenants. So that might just be a short-lived case, which are naturally come to an end. So, but we are also seeing an increase in people abandoning the properties, so just leaving. So there may be people with mental health problems, etc. We need to, examine those to understand what we can from the tenants who have left us, to try and understand why things are happening, as well as the figures. And as I say, also benchmark those against other organisations who are doing better than we are.
Thank you. Councillor Leamy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. It's a really good answer, and thanks for all you're doing to support residents and maintain these important assets to the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions, but I'll stick on the same theme if that's all right. On the average days to let and then the satisfaction with responsive repairs. Mr. Campbell will know of a particularly difficult situation I had in one of my villages of repairs that went on for some time, and that was because of there was an issue with the roof and having to have the solar panels removed because they'd been on there for some time and then put back on, and that obviously meant there were lots of different things to try and repair it. So I'm just wondering whether it would be helpful to have sort of a breakdown of what type of repairs that we're doing, because obviously that's going to affect some of the averages. If it's substantial work like roof or whether it's minor works, and whether we collect that data so we can see if there's trends of particular things, and if that information could be available to members. I sort of ask because sometimes I do worry that we don't sort of monitor how the houses are being kept sometimes, and I think this alludes to it in the last paragraph about pre-termination inspections, because I know that we do the walkarounds. I've been on walkarounds of the housing officers, and that's great. But I'm wondering how often we actually do sort of house inspections as you would if you were in the private rental sector and the such like, because there are people desperately, I'm very nervous actually about changing the target. I'd be much happier hearing how we're going to meet the target, because obviously we don't have enough affordable housing for everybody, so we need to make it available as quickly as possible. And I'd be really interested to see the nature of the repairs that are being done, because from that there may be some remedial works that we could do across our stock while the tenants are in place that would help with that. So, Chair, I think that was that, and the responsive repairs.
Okay, so Councillor John Batchelor.
Yes, thanks very much for that. Yes, I think Councillor Williams, what you're laying out there is almost precisely what we're actually doing. We already have different categories of repair, i.e., large jobs, small jobs, and so on. So those are all identified. So as we work up the new breakdown on this particular thing, I think we will be using those certainly. On the what else did we have? The tenants, right? The time taken, and when I first got involved with this, we had quite a lot of houses which were under repair, or more often waiting for repair for some considerable period. We've actually looked at that over the recent year or so, and I can now say that houses which are being out of use for more than 6 months are now only 3. Of those, 2 are 6 months to a year, and there's one property over 1 year. I think that's as far as I can go. I'm sure Peter has more.
Yeah. So yeah, just to come back about the information required. Yes, we have a whole suite of performance indicators that we get off the MERS contract, and we only present a small subset of that within the key performance indicators. So we will rest assured all that is collected in the background and is shared, particularly with our tenants groups as part of the contract monitoring. Yeah. we can look at how to how to make more of that available to members, but also there's some reluctance to make this report overly long if it contained all the details. Coming to the issue about property inspections, we do not carry out periodic inspections of all our tenanted properties, and a compulsory inspection would be treated as an unfair tenancy term, and in fact, that they occasionally, when people have tried to do that, the legality of that has been challenged and overturned, and is also massively an expensive project to complete. So what we do try and do, though, is to make sure that we recognise that our tenants are visited by a whole range of officers at different times and under different circumstances. And what we try to do is to make it as easily as possible for any officer who's visiting a property to report issues of repairs issues or indeed disrepair issues back to us as soon as possible, and we take appropriate action. So, for example, members will recall, there was a recent communication sent out which included to all members to officers how to identify damp and mould in properties. So that can be reported back to us as quickly as possible so that we can take immediate action rather than waiting for a formal inspection.
So Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate you saying not want to put everything into this report, but I think particularly if targets and things are being looked at and being changed, it'd be very helpful if a note could just be distributed to all members, just so we can have a fuller understanding of what's what. And part of my question, perhaps I didn't phrase it very clearly, Chair, was about the responsive repairs and tenants being satisfied. To me, that links with us taking longer to sort it out. How much of this is delays in being able to get there to repair the properties, or how long the repairs are taking? And that's what I'm trying to look. Is it as a response rate, or is it just we cannot meet the levels of repairs needed in that time frame?
Okay, thank you. Go back to
I'll come back on that if you like.
Maddox again.
Peter Campbell.
Sorry.
Go to Peter Maddox if you like. Yeah, Councillor Williams. So you're relating to the.
Peter Campbell, it's definitely you, despite my attempts to transfer it.
So yes, so you're looking at AH204, tenants satisfied with responsive repairs. And look, we are the information that we're getting on the performance from MEAs for the responsive repair. So these are for tenanted properties. It is telling us a different story. It's telling us that the majority of repairs are completed on time. Yet satisfaction, although improved, is not improving to the same extent as we would hope. So what we are doing, and it's mentioned briefly in the text, is we are suspicious that the methodology used to collect that data is flawed, and that's leading to people who are dissatisfied with the service to over-report. So we're looking at engaging with a independent research company to carry out an independent survey of the repairs, so we get a more accurate figure. That also reflects the concerns from the housing regulator, who, following the feedback from Grenfell, wants to make sure that we have more accurate information from tenants. So in the future, and this again from April, we'll start to use a different methodology for the tenant satisfaction, and we think that will provide a more realistic figure.
Councillor Williams. Happy to move on. Okay, Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to observe that on AH211, the average days to relet all housing stock on page 66, although the actual is showing us red and we've had discussion about it, I just wanted to observe that the graph on the left-hand side of the page shows that actually this has improved significantly over the last 18 months, year. And so I just wanted to thank the officers for the work that they must have done and the improvements that we've been told about with the contract with MEARS, which have obviously ended up in resulting in a much better record than we've had in the previous year. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bradnam. Councillor Hobro.
Sorry, Chair, may I just add to that?
Of course you may, yes.
Yes, I thank you for those comments. Of course, unfortunately, the early stages on the graph reflect the COVID period, so it's not representative of the longer term trend. But I wanted to inform members as well as that the actual figures for January available, and there's been a continued improvement, and now we're down to 25 days for January.
Thank you. Councillor Hobro.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question about the KPI for household waste collection. So this is page 68, and the indicator is ES418. I actually have two questions. Perhaps I'll just ask the first for now, and maybe I can come back with the second if that's okay. So my first question was looking at that KPI over time, then I can see that there's a bulge in the figures every summer. They sort of go up slightly, presumably because there's lots more compost. And then it comes down in the winter. But the overall trend between July 2021 and the present does appear to be one of it coming down slightly. Now I accept, I've read what's written in the comments about the December figures. I think that applies just to the month of December that's just passed. So my question really is whether this, what looks to me like an overall trend in the wrong direction, is interpreted as such. And if so, if we have any understanding of the reasons for that, because I imagine that we're hoping that this indicator will, over time, gradually increase as we have more and more recycling.
Okay. Can I go to Councillor Brian Milnes, who I see has got himself on the screen ready? Councillor Brian Milnes in the first instance as the Deputy Leader, and then I'm sure we'll be going to Bode next.
So we actually increased the target figures, as you'll see from the graph. There was a jump. And if we'd have left them as they were, we would have still been passing the target. But we want to move this in the right direction. We want better recycling, better improved lack of contamination of black bin waste, which is going to landfill. And this is part of a behavioural change that we're going to have to get adopted by our residents. And that's going to take time and effort to do. And we're already going through that process of trying to get people to do better waste management as they put their bin waste out every week. Bodie, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Thanks, Councillor Milnes. Thank you, Chair. I think that's right. What I would just add is that nationally, there's actually been a trend downwards. So the actual UK recycling rates went down in 2020, 2021. There's a lot of change going on nationally to do with packaging, to do with how people deposit materials on the curbs. So there are lots of new regulations coming in. So we are reaching a point where we're getting quite stagnant and we need to make a step change to increase the figures. That step change will likely come from how we collect other materials. So what we're going to be doing later this year, in collaboration with other district councils, recap authorities in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, is looking at the overall strategy of how we manage waste and what other actions we can be doing just to push those numbers up. But I think the main thing is there's a lot of change going on nationally. with packaging waste, with how waste deposited. Post-COVID, people are treating waste in a different manner. Some deposit their materials in the recycling center, some at work. So there's a lot of compounding factors. But we've bucked the trend a little bit by maintaining where we are, not dropping compared to national figures. But we will be developing a new overall waste strategy in the course of this year, which should then put us in a good place to increase the rates.
So thank you. That's an excellent answer. Thank you very much. So if despite the downward trend that we see here, we're still ahead of the national trend, then that sounds like very good news. Thank you. May I ask my second question?
Yes, please do.
Thank you. So the second question it relates to a question asked at the previous meeting when we were discussing the business plan. And I think we put in place a high-level target to reduce the overall volume of waste that we process, as in addition to looking at the percentage of waste that's recycled and reused. And I wondered if we might consider perhaps having a KPI that allows that overall volume to be observed over time. And I wondered if you could, if there could be some comments on how it has changed over time and whether or not we might consider adding a KPI to watch that figure.
Councillor Mills?
Yeah, we do do audits of the waste collection process to measure what people are putting out. That's done on a frequent basis. I don't know whether turning that into a KPI in its own right would be useful. Certainly worth considering for Bodie and Henry Batchelor, who's now got that portfolio. But you're right in general in that the target is to reduce waste wherever possible, and obviously to increase wherever possible recyclable waste. And we see significant changes going on in the packaging industry, where we're moving away from plastics to recyclable materials, so back to paper and starch-based packaging, which is helping the process. And I think there is a general growing awareness from the public of reducing waste. So we're going back to days when I was growing up, of going to the greengrocer and having your vegetables and tomatoes, if there are any, put straight into your shopping bag, rather than to be put into separate bags and then taken home. So it is a part of that circular economy that we're aiming to improve our performance. And again, I'll give Bodie a chance to add anything that he feels he'd like to.
Thanks, Councillor Mills. Thank you, Chair. We actually do have a parameter that we track. This is the amount of residual waste. So after recycling and composting, what's left in the black bin, we actually track that. And that's on a pretty good trajectory. What I think you had asked before was how much waste we produce as a whole, which we have the figures, but we don't track that. There is a national target coming into force soon. So what we will do is that we'll set our own targets based on the national figure, so we don't duplicate the efforts. But we do track residual waste, which gives an indication of how much waste people are producing. And so far, the trajectory is good. And in the course of this year, once DEFRA sets the targets, it's going to be about a 2030, 2050 target for the overall waste generation per household. Then we will mirror that and set more stringent targets for ourselves locally.
Thank you. Councillor Hobro?
So thank you very much for the answers. So I think, if I understand correctly, then that would be once we have a DEFRA target, once the national framework is clear, would that mean that we would then add a KPI to track that target? And if so, then that's a great answer to the question. Thank you. And I just comment that I feel that if since our tagline is that we're green to the core, if we're not watching this and if this isn't sort of captured somewhere in the figures that we're watching, I think it would look a little bit like an anomaly. And so I'd be very happy to hear that's being added in response to the DEFRA target. Thank you.
We need to move on. Okay. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. On this subject, yeah, I think would be really useful to see sort of the residual black bin waste that there is, because if we're encouraging people to have less packaging and everything else, and supermarkets are doing that, the fact that our recycler is coming down isn't necessarily an indicator that everything's going wrong. It is, I think, personally, I'm more interested to see where sort of the black bin waste is going. And, you know, there has been, like say, habit change as well. I can say that you'll never find milk bottles, plastic milk bottles in my rubbish, and would never have done, because my daughter's godfather's the milkman, so that's quite handy. But we can see that more people are actually returning to those ways. What I think would be really good to hear back from on this topic is a couple of us, I think in Milton, so I'm looking towards Councillor Anna Bradnam and Councillor Bear Park, you have the food waste trial in Milton, and I have it in half of my ward. I think some in Linton as well. It's not something that I don't know if all members are aware that it's sort of happening, and it would be good. It's been trialled for quite some time now. It would be good to get some feedback to see how that's going and whether that is improving things when it comes to the green waste and where that's at. I think that would be quite a useful and interesting thing for this committee to look at.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, we can just move on. Yeah, okay. Councillor Paul Bear Park.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question on the same topic, actually. Is in terms of the way this is reported, we've obviously got dry recycling and composting kind of reported together, but obviously they're completely different types of waste. And I think if they were separated out, we may be able to see what's happening with the two types of waste. I mean, I've mentioned previously, I think, in SEAC committee meetings that I'd like to see a little bit more home composting rather than the heavy compost being transported by vehicle many miles in the waste vehicles. It seems that, you know, there are many benefits to home composting. You know, because people can then use that compost themselves. Some, you know, certainly my green bin gets very heavy in the autumn, and I definitely think I should be doing some more composting.
Okay, great, thank you. Would you like a response from Councillor Mills, or are we taking that as
If he'd like to respond, yes.
Yes, excellent. Councillor
Well,
Mills?
I think I'm very much in agreement with Councillor Bear Park for comments about home composting, for example. Anything that can stop us having to collect and take away and then dispose separately, it would be a benefit to us, obviously. And you know, the reduction of black bin waste is clearly critical, because if that goes to landfill, we do sorting of that to try and improve the performance of black bin waste. Anything that goes to landfill is charged to us. So anything that we can reduce our black bin waste, the better for the service. And we are moving in the right direction. There's national legislation that Bodhi's referred to, and that's going to bring in significant changes related to the food waste programme and separate food waste collection, but that's going to have to be resolved. We have to resolve national consistency in terms of waste collection and disposal, and we've got extra complications locally where if we change the profile of our waste collection, then our waste disposal authority, the county council and their contract, has to also make similar changes to their processes as well. So that's an additional complication that we have to deal with.
Okay, thank you. Bode, anything to add to that?
Thank you, Jack. Can I just add that we actually have a subsidized home composting scheme. So across the recap authorities, Cambridge and Peterborough, we have a fund that provides subsidized home composting bins to all residents up to a limit. So we actually very actively encourage home composting, and it's something that we would want to request support of members as well to make that more known to their in their parishes. We very actively promote home composting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bear Park.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe that's something for the next South Cams magazine to promote that then.
And Councillor Ellington.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to put in a plea here that we have to teach our residents not to put the leftover Sunday dinner and so on in the home composting. From my daughter, who runs my pest control company, only told me today how many people are suffering with rats because they are putting food, inappropriate food, in their composting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ellington. I assume you're making that as a statement rather than looking for Councillor Milnes to reply, because I'm sure he'll nod sagely and agree, as will Bode. Yes, okay, excellent. I shall move on. Councillor Anna Bradnam. No? Okay. Then it just leaves with me. If I could just take us back to, sorry, it's me now, by the way. If I can just take us back to the figures in relation to the housing repairs, because there's something that struck me, and I wonder whether or not it could be sort of explained. So, if I was to start on the housing figures in relation to the fact that for emergency repairs inside 24 hours, there is 100% of those being completed, which is a really, really positive figure and suggests that there's a really good response to what people are doing. So I've now found it on my screen. It's SH332 on page 66. So as you can see, for October, November and December, we have 100% of emergency repairs completed within 24 hours, which is a really, really positive figure and suggests a really strong response. I'm then struck by the fact that for AH204, we obviously have talked about the fact that we have a relatively much lower level of tenants satisfied with responsive repairs of around 90% in both September and December. And I wondered, Councillor John Batchelor in the first instance, if you had any thoughts about how there seems to be such a difference between those two figures?
Thank you, Chair. Well, one, there are different things entirely in that, you know, an emergency repair is an emergency repair, and, you know, maybe you were flooded out or something like that, and clearly we're giving that the top priority. Going back to the satisfaction responses, I mean, I've never been satisfied personally with these because the response rate is so low. We're talking about something like 15 to 20% response rates. Because MEARS is using a system based on email and text contact. As Peter has outlined, we're looking to go to a completely different and much more professional way of dealing with this, in that we will actually phone up people who had a repair and actually ask them, you know, standard and significant questions so that we're actually getting a proper response. As Peter also said about the current situation, that, you know, there's no incentive for anybody to respond unless they've had a bad time. I mean, it's quite amazing that we're getting around 90% satisfaction out of that, really. So that's my view of that, Chairman.
Campbell, anything to add on that?
No, I think John's covered pretty much everything, but just to add, to put a bit of a meat on that. So emergency repairs covered in 332 are probably less than 10% of all repairs. And they're the ones that, you know, carried out, you know, as it says, as an emergency, be loss of heating, lighting, no flushable toilets, etc. So really proper emergencies. And if we do not get to those quickly, you know, people really do suffer. So that's why I give that the priority. the responsive repairs overall on 204 of the satisfaction rate is a much wider cross section of all the repairs. And as I've mentioned, and John's also said, is that the methodology appears to be letting us down, and we've got an opportunity to make that much better.
Okay, great. But I would still say that even though, as you say, it's only 10% of action is those emergency responses, we do sadly sometimes hear about situations where councils do not respond really quickly to people's complaints and do not respond really quickly to complaints about things that happen in their houses. So I would definitely like to flag up the fact that that is a consistent 100% figure is something that should be really flagged up as a positive thing. Secondly, I wanted to flag something up on page 68, which is SF786A, which is staff sicknesses, days per full-time equivalent, shared waste services only. And I really wanted to flag up the fact that the explanation given and the text there, I thought was an exemplary example of leadership and management in terms of looking after staff. There's clearly, where there is an issue in relation to staff attendance and being supportive, there's really good information in there about how staff are being supported to make sure that they feel motivated and cared for, and then talks about training focused on nutrition and health, and I think that's a really excellent example there. So I wasn't particularly looking for a response, beyond hopefully perhaps a nod of, yes, that's what we think, but I think that was a really, really good example, and I found the information there incredibly positive to think of. And I just had one more thing that I wanted to flag up, which is CC305, which I've now lost on my screen, I do apologise. Yes, CC305 at the top of page 69. And building really on something that Councillor Bradham talked about earlier in terms of trends, already within that data we can see an increase in the number of formal complaints being resolved within timescale just in September and December from 84% to 91%. But looking at the blue line going backwards, we can see that there has been a significant improvement in the proportion of complaints being resolved in the timescale. I just wondered whether there could be any sort of further explanation given to the committee on how that has been achieved, because I think that, we ask questions about things when they go wrong, quite rightly, but this, for me, really highlights a success story. So I wondered if we could have some more detail on that. I'm going to go to Councillor Milnes in the first instance, simply as the deputy leader, but he may wish to defer to someone else.
So you'll notice this is a Jeff Membry item on here, and Jeff is very busy with his transformation programme. So the chief exec might want to say some more. I've just seen you pointing at her.
Thank you. Thank you, through you, Chair. So Jeff's on holiday at the moment. So we worked really hard at this. Our performance was not good, and that was clear for probably over a year. And we've really focused on resolving, keeping complaints in hand, making sure that we're responding in a timely manner, that there were identified complaints champions in every service, and it's hard work is the answer to the question, and I think we just need to be really careful now to maintain that.
Great, thank you very much. In that case then, I do not see anyone else's hand, so I'm then happy to move on to our next item, which is item 8, the further support for cost of living crisis to South Cambridgeshire residents. I'm conscious that at least 2 of our Cabinet members have to move on to another meeting within the next 20 minutes or so. So therefore, if I can ask colleagues, we'll go straight into it rather than particularly hearing about it. So if councillor colleagues would like to ask any questions at this stage, I know there will be other people who are capable of answering the questions, but I know we are going to lose 2 of our Cabinet colleagues fairly soon. So, councillor colleagues, who would like to start us off with a question or comment in relation to the further support for cost of living crisis for South Cambridgeshire residents? I have Sue Ellington's hand up already.
Thank you, Chairman. I have run 2 cost of living days in my patch with great support from South Cambs, I have to say, especially revenue and benefits, HIA and the community team. But village people are very, very reluctant to be seen attending what might be construed as and I wonder what additional steps are being taken to really reach those who are really in need before a crisis strikes.
Thank you. We lost you in a moment there, but I felt we got the gist of your question there. Councillor Milne, should I come to you in the first instance here in terms of Cabinet before you defer perhaps to an officer if you wish to do so?
Well, I may bring Liz Watts back in. Our lead member is absent this week. He's on vacation, so apologies for Bill Hanley's absence. The dilemma that we have is one that is replicated across social care, that people don't want to be seen to be in receipt of benefits, quite frankly. It's something that people avoid. So I think the atmosphere at many of our warm hubs, for example, and I know other examples of food hubs, one in Harston, for example, is very congenial, and it's very difficult to distinguish between volunteers and visitors. It's not set up that way, and they've been very careful to do that, and that's something that I think that we could usefully emulate if we're not already doing so. So a valuable point that we don't want people being embarrassed and therefore missing out on benefits and help that we're offering.
Gareth Bell.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Ellington's got a really good point. I think it's a topic that we've discussed in the office before. We saw this through the COVID pandemic as well, where you've got kind of hyper local support. You know, people not being as keen to seek support from their neighbours. I think in this report we've got a couple of elements that try to look to address this, where we've got some really targeted kind of contact of residents who we can identify through the data that we hold within the council. There's work to do to make sure we target those to the right people, but again, trying to reach people who perhaps wouldn't step forward and make them aware of the various support that's available. And also, I think there's just work here as well, trying to kind of make this move on the sort of conversation here, not just to be around that stigma really of people who require support, but actually some of the work that tries to pull together the cost of living support that's being proposed, particularly around the kind of sustainable food network, also has kind of quite a kind of green agenda aspect to it as well. So I think that that's something that obviously is important to this council and to our residents as well. So I think that it's a challenge. It's one that we're aware of, Councillor Ellington, and I think it's one we're going to have to keep trying to sort of chip away at, to be honest.
Okay. Councillor Ellington.
Thank you. I do agree. I was quite, the incident that really brought it home to me was that I was running one of these action days deliberately on a Friday afternoon in the building next to the school where everybody parked their car in order to come and collect their young child. And the number of people I heard saying, no, I won't go in, no, I won't go in. When it was there on their doorstep, deliberately placed there for their help. But some of the other mothers would have seen them going in, and it was just very evident. And I think we all need to find ways and share that knowledge amongst ourselves as those, in order to help the communications team find new ways of getting to across the line, as it were. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ellington. Councillor Cohn.
Thanks very much, Chair. So my question was around warm hubs on page 77. And really, I was just seeing if it is possible to get any further information on who is using the warm hubs and really what they are being used for. So they may have very other good community benefit other than providing people with warmth, essentially, or people that are unable to, manage heating bills and so forth. And in my experience, having spoke to residents that have attended warm hubs, it's quite often not to keep warm, essentially. It might be for very other genuine reasons, like social isolation, playing board games, interacting with other people, community groups, but that they are not seeking warmth, essentially, which is kind of what they were set up to do, but they may be having very other worthwhile benefits. I just wondered if there was any way of quantifying that. I know further on in the report you allude to the other community benefits that they are providing.
Councillor Mills.
No, Councillor Cohn is absolutely right in that the usage of the warm hubs has been for a variety of reasons. You mentioned social isolation and loneliness in the community is a very well-known problem. If I'll refer back to Gareth, who I'd like to just, I didn't realise he was in the room, so I would have introduced him earlier in the previous question had I realised. And I'd like to thank him and his team for the fantastic work they've been doing on this programme. Again, above and beyond. So thanks to him and his team.
Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. I think probably my short answer would be I completely agree with Councillor Cohn. I think you've completely hit the nail on the head. That is what the evidence is telling us. But I'd probably come back to conversations around that huge impact that sort of isolation has on health anyway. So we know that around 1,000 visits a month to warm hubs, but I agree kind of to keep warm is probably not the primary reason for visits. In the paper, you can see that we're trying to, although there's going to be further data that we get from the warm hubs towards in a bit more time, so we'll have a bit more summary of all of the work that's taken place so far, probably that'll be around May. We don't want to lose the momentum, and that's hence why we're bringing the report now. But in the report, you'll see that there's kind of a evolving warm hubs, learning from the first phase, looking at kind of how they're branded, and I think that kind of comes back to Councillor Ellington's point as well. But it's still not going to be, easy. But and also the report sort of touches on the integrated care system as well. Probably all agencies thinking similar here is not to lose that momentum and the conversations there around financial kind of support for programmes such as that, which we're very kind of positive that we'd be in a good position, particularly if we took forward this programme to secure funding as well. So so I think I'd probably just echo your views, Councillor Cohn, and it will be interesting to see that full analysis that comes out in the sort of weeks ahead.
Okay, Councillor Cohn.
Thanks very much, Cheers.
Okay, Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, I want to preface my question with the fact that I'm very happy that we're supporting individuals, families and businesses that need our help, but would like to see some data to justify the ongoing support. So paragraph 5 on page 74 of our agenda refers to the cost of living crisis continuing to have a major impact on people in South Cambridgeshire. And paragraph 6 refers to the crisis impacting on people even with moderate to good incomes, as well as those already in hardship. And I appreciate that in November, we agreed at Council to provide a range of support targeted at more vulnerable residents, and that our current offer of support ends in March 2023, and that we need to make a commitment to that if we want to continue. But the report is written in quite general terms, and I understand probably why, but it doesn't say what is the data that is driving our understanding of the number of people that are in need. So I, for example, would suggest that before this paper goes to Cabinet, you might, excuse me, you might want to add something like data from the Trussell Trust about the number of food vouchers that are being required, or evidence of the number of people seeking help from our customer control centres, saying, asking for help, financial help or help with food, or the number of people who have welcomed and accepted the opportunity to have electric blankets and slow cookers, that sort of thing, so that we have some data-driven justification for this. As I say, I'm absolutely not saying we shouldn't be doing it. I'm just saying I think it might be useful for us to be able to justify the commitment and the support that we're making. Thank you.
Councillor Milnes.
All I'd do is agree with Councillor Bradnam, and I'm sure Gareth and the team are going to do that. Evidence that we have elsewhere, John Huntington Charity in Sawston here has seen, I think, 3 or 4 times the normal call on their support services locally, so that it's an indication of the type that Councillor Brandon wants to see, and I'm sure we can build up that data in the coming months.
Okay. Gareth, Brad.
So thank you, Councillor Bradnam. Absolutely, as Councillor Milne said, I think it's a really good addition to the report. I thought councillors I could just give you a few highlights just whilst we're in the meeting.
Please.
I'd love to say that I prepared this, but a colleague did. Around 300 people have been supplied with electric blankets. I think, as I said, Warm Hubs constantly getting over about 1,000 visits a month. We've got that food parcel service, which provides parcels to people who perhaps can't connect to a food bank in kind of the normal way. So we're seeing around about 10 parcels a week delivered there, and I think we'll see that continue to increase. Just to add to Councillor Milne's point in regard to John Huntington's charity, so Cambridge City Food Bank have seen a 40% increase on 2021 in number of people supported, so it's 13,580 last year. We work really closely with Hope Community Interest Company in Camborne, who have supported over 60 clients since January 2023. And that's a rise of around 50% since 2022. Citizens Advice have seen a 29% increase in crisis support when people can't afford to heat or eat. And they've seen an 87% increase in energy support given in 2022 compared to 2021. In regards to sort of the council, we've got our income maximisation officer, which we've had for some time prior to the crisis being declared by the council, who's had 56 referrals in the past 2 months alone, which is sort of double the average of the previous 18 months. And the communities team have seen over 4 times the amount of people contacting that team for support over the last 2 months compared to the 2 months previous. And I think that's the key information that would probably give you a picture of, I think, what members, as you alluded to, Councillor Bradnam, the picture that we believe we see, but some of the data that quite rightly will be able to feed into the report to give that more context.
Liz Watts, anything to add? Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I think there's historic data, which is really important, but for me, what's also important is analysing data to enable us to target and support more carefully, and that's set out in paragraph 34 of this report. So we have loads of data in the council, but we've never had the resource to allocate to layering it on top of each other, and for us to be able to say, okay, from all the data that we have, these are the people that we think will need the support. So at the moment, we're getting people come to us, and there's probably a cohort of people who just either don't know about us or don't get to us for whatever reason. So I think that part of the project, in terms of doing much more sophisticated data analysis, is really important too.
Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you. And I'm very glad to hear that data will feed into the report that goes to Cabinet. But the other thing, to reinforce what Liz Watts has said, is that we know from the integrated care system and the Director of Public Health that there is an understanding that you never can pin down exactly who needs your help. And so actually it's better to give it to as many people as you can, because somehow, somewhere along the line, it will filter down to the people who really need it. So in the same way that currently heating is being subsidised currently, that went out to everybody because that's the only way you could be sure of helping everybody who needed it. Thank you very much. And I'm sure the report will be the richer for it. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Just before I move on, just hitting 7 o'clock. Councillor Mills, am I correct that you and Councillor Batchelor need to leave at 7 o'clock? That's fine. So what we'll do for the questions carrying on now is, Councillor John Williams, as you'll be the Cabinet member remaining, I'm not going to necessarily expect you to answer. You are always welcome to answer, obviously. What I will do is I will defer to Gareth each time in the first instance, but should you wish on behalf of the Cabinet to pitch in, then obviously please do so. So thank you, Councillor Batchelor, and thank you, Councillor Mills, for your attendance. Councillor Paul Bear-Park.
Thank you, Chair. Really wanted to express my wholehearted support for these ongoing targeted measures, and in particular the funding of a dedicated officer, which I think will help with the targeting concerns that people have raised here. I can see, there are multiple overlapping benefits with the support that's been given, whether it's in terms of health, reduced energy bills, social benefits. I do fear, though, that with the increase in the energy price guarantee by an extra 20%, which on average will take the average bill to an eye-watering £3,000 a year, is, to be honest, it's going to swamp anything that we can do as a council, which is so disappointing that it's rising again. But my question really is, I can see how the question for Councillor Williams, actually, I can see how it's built up from the bottom up in terms of the budget, but how do we define what's affordable from the council's point of view when deciding what the budget should be for this sort of thing?
That might be you, Councillor John Williams, actually, yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, we've been working, and Gareth will explain this, we've been working quite closely with other agencies, particularly integrated care. And we have a pretty good idea as to what sort of amount of funding that we can get from other sources apart from the council. So we can then understand what we need to deliver in order to release that additional funding. And it really is a matter of seeing how we can maximise that funding from elsewhere through the release of our funding, which is why we're looking at around £200,000 to put into this pot in order to receive the additional funding to enable us to, deliver this package of measures. So that's really the starting point, really, is to understand the way we can release funding from other people and to maximise that funding, and then that determines what we need to put into the mix.
Yeah, anything to add to that?
Thank you, Chair. I think the only thing I'd add here is we've moved really quickly. Councillors declared a cost of living crisis in September. Sort of by November, we had a package of measures agreed by Cabinet and had really been sort of moving with existing resources to move forward there. You know, in a matter of months, it feels like we've made great strides. What I feel this report does in regard to that balance between a longer commitment and affordability is tries to deliver programs that give the opportunity for them to be taken forward in a more sort of self-sustaining way. And I think that we very much see some of the kind of sustainable food network really, you know, tying that together and creating something that has more of a sort of lasting legacy into the future. You know, probably some of the projects we're working on at the moment are things that we probably saw us doing, you know, 12 months ago or a bit further. But it does feel that there's been good conversations with Councillor Williams in regards to kind of that affordability. Obviously, that would be a cabinet decision. But I think this commitment does really unlock that additional funding for other partners as well to make it, you know, a really kind of far-reaching programme with that commitment into 2 years. And I think the balance for us in regard to putting forward the paper was really keen to try and look for something that give us sort of 2 years of commitment to give us the opportunity to really do that work that Liz Watts described around the more analysis of data, because I think just kind of 1 year we'd be looking at these kind of programs but wouldn't have really got under the skin of how much more we could do around data. But obviously always a decision for councillors in regard to that balance of financial investment versus affordability, but this is a programme that doesn't have a ongoing commitment on the kind of the council's general fund.
Thank you. Councillor Bear-Park?
Yeah, no, thank you very much for those answers. Nothing further to add.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sally Ann Hart.
Thank you, Chair. Just referring really to I think what Councillor Kerr was talking about, page 77, paragraph 30, and this idea of the evolution of the warm hubs into these community wellbeing hubs. And so a couple of parish council meetings this week where they were already thinking about, you know, the weather's probably going to get warmer, but we still recognise there's a need, and talking about that sort of social and emotional warmth, not just physical warmth. And it was really, yes, to see this written here about how we can take this forward, how it can be community-led. I take what Councillor Ellington said about, you know, perhaps stigma being associated with that. So I'm just thinking in terms of moving forward, perhaps as members, encouraging our parish councils to be thinking about how these evolve, as I say, into these community wellbeing hubs. Had some fantastic pictures on a parish council report last night of people playing indoor bowls at one of these meetings. Maybe it's something, as I say, that we could, as members, get into our monthly reports to looking into the future, because each community is different, has different needs. And maybe in terms of the South Cambs magazine's an article, you know, for the summer, to, as far as possible, normalise it. People we're social beings, we need contact, and there's nothing wrong with seeking it. And I think what it has done has offered this awful situation an opportunity for people perhaps to go back to those spaces that were closed during the pandemic and feel the warmth that's there. Interestingly as well, the people actually providing the support, saying how much they've got out of doing it, you know, people who perhaps would never have got involved, a chair of a parish council saying how much he really enjoys going to the groups and meeting members of the community that he'd never met before. So I think we've got wonderful opportunities here, and the more we can publicise it moving forward, it then, I say, that community cohesion idea comes back to the fore. So thank you for all you've done to support it.
You happy for me to move on? So I thought, yeah, take it as a statement. Okay. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. Just wondering whether we keep a list or whether we ask parish councils about parish hardship funds or charities. Like I think one was mentioned earlier, a lot of my parishes have a Townland charity. But just thinking when people get in touch with us, they're probably going to need a lot of support, maybe not so much, maybe something we can't do that a parish charity could help with. And the other thing is that while we work on district boundaries, many organisations don't. And there's one that I put in touch with Gareth a while ago about can give support quite often in emergencies, but they're Bedfordshire based, but they would, if it was, you know, in my ward, for example, they would come and help. And I'm just wondering how much we're reaching out to, and when we're consulting, taking advice and seeing whether our residents are going outside of the district to seek support, because I know half of my residents would go to Royston before Camborne or anywhere, or even Melbourne or anywhere else, or they'd go to Biggleswade and Potton. So I think they've got a similar issue on the Linton side of people going to sort of Saffron Walden and what have you. So just want to make sure that we are helping the residents of South Cambridgeshire, not looking at just what's in South Cambridgeshire, if that makes sense, Chair.
Gareth.
Thanks, Councillor Williams. I think in regards to parish hardship charities, I think it'll be an overwhelming yes, please. In regard to kind of those linkages and any further information, we're always building up our kind of knowledge that we've got to provide support in case people come directly into the team rather than directly to local members and to local communities. So I think you can definitely look out for Chris Richards reaching out to members on that. In regard to kind of like outside the area and serving our population rather than our geography, again, absolutely in regard to working with partners and the information we provide, you know, we've got those subtleties around Royston, Haverhill and different areas where actually services are accessed kind of beyond our geographical boundaries. But again, if members have any sort of local knowledge that they think that perhaps officers may not know, you know, as I say, we're really building up our kind of tools in the toolbox in regard to how we can support people, and the better information we have, the better. But we are already certainly looking at serving the population rather than looking within the geography.
Great. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair, and that's really good. And I just sort of reference something that we learned, I think, through the pandemic. I remember there was something that we had done, and we were advising residents to go to Bar Hill when actually there was the ability in Royston. So, you know, as well, just trying to make sure that it's local. We just didn't know what was happening in Royston at that time. So that'd be really, really helpful.
Great, thank you. Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you. After that long line of questions and answers, I don't have so much to say, but I just want to underline the point that every parish is different and every parish has approached all of this stuff very differently. So Councillor Hart underlined that really very well. So the kind of things that might be a challenge, I think through you, Chair, Liz Watts made a very good comment about the importance of data. So if you have, for example, a lunch club that closed down during COVID and reopened and actually became a lunch club plus warm hub, it would be very helpful to find out where that phenomenon, how that phenomenon is developing. Is it peculiar to certain parishes? What kind of help is actually could be directed to that kind of thing? And do those things fall into certain categories? In Girton, for example, there's a Thursday morning gathering, which has been going on for years at the Baptist Church, but the minister felt that the best thing to do was have that Thursday gathering in the afternoon when people were willing to come out, wanted to come out and actually get warm and have coffee and talk about their issues. So I think collecting data, really invaluable, being sensitive to local differences, really, really helpful. And the COVID to now cost of living crisis, fuel crisis, there's been a transition which has left a few things in its wake, and things like lunch clubs that never really picked up after COVID are probably there, ready to activate. The role of parish councillors, I think, parish councils, could be to coordinate and facilitate. And I think we've talked often about parish councils as you know, could be recipients of more help in that regard. To deliver a service or to deliver an understanding. Of course, we're reminded of the parish councils did a superb job during COVID at spotting the anomalies, and the police, like parish councils that report on strange behaviour in their villages, because it helps them do their job as well. So there's nothing like local effectiveness. So just a few thoughts, Chair. I hope they're useful.
Okay, great. Thank you. Happy for me to move on and take that as just a point. Yes, great. Thank you. Councillor Earle.
I was going to make a comment about the food banks and community gardens and plant-based diets. One of the issues with plant-based diets is they're quite expensive, and they're also, if you go around Waitrose or Tesco's, highly processed. And one of the issues we have now is people eating highly processed foods. But highly processed is easy. Cooking fresh vegetables isn't. I suppose my comment would follow on from Councillor Ellington, which is what could we have some kind of help out there that people could access and not feel sensitive having to access, that enables people to actually deal with vegetable-based, plant-based diet, because it's not that easy, faced with a celeriac and a Swede, to make something that's palatable, that your children will eat, and that's actually going to cook easily. We've provided slow cookers, which assume that people are cooking from scratch, but I'm not convinced that they always are. The cheapest foods and the things that we see in the food banks being taken up, I've had some experience of this, are the quick, easy, the tins, the packets, the frozen chicken nuggets, etc. And we kind of need to join that a little bit. Maybe we just need some kind of, again, bringing in an initiative into the warm hubs or community centres to help people actually access this food that we're going to provide or that they're going to grow in the community gardens, to make it meaningful and encourage a healthy diet.
Okay, thank you. Gareth?
So I think it's a really valid point, and I think that another member made the point around the impact that we can have and where we need to focus our energy and resources, and I think it's a challenge. But I think the work around that's in the paper under point 33 on the South Cambridgeshire Sustainable Food Network, I think that's where we can really look at the kind of art of the possible around that particular point, because I think the sort of, it's a very kind of busy life for many people these days, and some of the sort of cooking from scratch is probably doesn't happen as much as perhaps it did in the past. So I think that some of the things around kind of community vegetable gardens and trying to get that better kind of supply and encourage healthy eating and kind of community cohesion, I think it does begin to address some of those points, but it certainly is going to be quite an amount of work to really make inroads into that area.
Okay. Councillor Earle, happy for us to move on? Great, thank you. Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to thank Gareth and the communities team for their work over this time, and I understand it's come on the back of a great deal of work following their response to the COVID pandemic and then responding to Ukraine. I'd also like to reflect on the statistics that he mentioned in response to Councillor Bradnam's question. I find it very sobering and quite upsetting to reflect that even in the last year there's been a 40% increase in food bank use within the Cambridge City area, and that will affect our residents because the Cambridge City Food Bank is the hub for the Trussell Trust food banks across the district. And I keep trying to think about what that means in terms of the implications for our residents in one of the wealthiest and most expensive parts of the country. There must be a great deal of inequality. I'd like to express my thanks that we're able to respond in this targeted way and that these resources have been allocated. I've got a very specific question about the £206,000. What is the timescale for this money that's been allocated? So I can see that there is an officer that's been noted in the budget. I'm looking at page 80 of the agenda, and it's point 37. There is an officer which has been allocated resources for 2 years. The other things that are listed on this sort of breakdown of costs, it's not clear what the timescale is involved with that. Is this a reserve that's in place until the money runs out? Is it for a year, the next 2 years? That's my first question. And my second question is building on the points that that Gareth raised about the experience of the users of the warm hubs. I understand that CAMSACA are responsible for sort of running that across the warm hubs across the region. Are they monitoring, surveying users on their experience? Have they been given sort of standard questions? And have the users of the people that are turning up to the warm hubs, have they been asked about what are their further needs? Is there anything that we could offer that perhaps we're not, or anything that we have offered that's been much appreciated? Just a kind of review of people's experience. Thank you.
Councillor John Williams, do you want to do the financial bit, or should I just go to Gareth? You do the financial bit. Yeah.
We'll have to do that. I mean, it's extremely difficult at the moment to see, to forecast, probably beyond the next 2 years. In fact, very difficult to forecast beyond the next 6 months. But at least we can identify and focus this resource over the next 2 years, which we know is sustainable. It's obviously going to be reviewed, and this will be under constant review, and I hope that we will get back to, a report will come back to Cabinet at least every 6 months to tell us how things are progressing. And then we will then be able to look beyond the 2 years to see what, if any more additional support is required, or whether or not this, as Gareth said, is sufficient to enable something sustainable to be set up and then to be self-sufficient in a way. So we don't really know. That is the issue. But at least for the next 2 years, we will have this in place. And I think we all hope that within those 2 years, things will get better. And that after 2 years, we will be in a much better place, that we don't require such amount of help. But at the moment, we don't really know. And I think we certainly need to be given this support for the next 6, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. But beyond that, we need to understand, and we won't be able to do that until we're a little way down the road to see how things are going to improve and where we may need to adjust our support to meet new circumstances that may arise that we may not even think of at the moment. I mean, who thought in 2018 that we were going to have a pandemic 2 years later? So I think this is a reasonable timescale to do this, but I can assure you that Cabinet will certainly be keeping this under review, and I know officers will as well, to see how things change. And it may well be that this will evolve, this will change over those 2 years to meet, changes in circumstances. But it's a start, and we know we can fund this, and we know that this is sustainable.
Gareth, to add?
Thank you, Chair. So just to address a couple of points from officer perspective here is, I think in point 28, there's on page 77, there's the cost of living crisis response strategy. So you're absolutely right, the report provides those overarching themes. I think if you were to talk to the team that's been working on this, Chris and Leslie in particular, they'd be really keen to see a lot of this work front-loaded over the 2 years, looking at a kind of a 2-year commitment to give us some flexibility and some realism around deliverability, but also that ability to look at the data work. So I think that cost of living crisis response strategy, sort of building on other strategies that we've got, we'll be able to to map this out better, to provide that certainty. I think the other thing, just building on Councillor Williams' point around the timing and activity, I think it's important to remember that the measures that we've put in since we declared the cost of living crisis and the Cabinet report is we did have a lot of core activity that's already taken place within the council to support people with cost of living already, and that's core activity that will remain and is built into the council's plans and in effect funded through the general fund. So this is additional activity. And then I think in regards to your second question on users of warm hubs, there is going to be more data that's going to be available around warm hubs. There has been ongoing monitoring and looking at that's why we know many of the kind of use of the warm hubs, a point that Councillor Cohn made around the reason for visiting, and we've got some of the data around numbers, but that sort of deeper analysis will help us build on, perhaps what the warm hubs look like next. I think that's helpful and helps on those 2 points.
Councillor Leeming.
Thank you very much to Councillor Williams and to Gareth for those answers. Are really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have 2 more down and then we'll be done with this item, I think. Councillor Hobray.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, I'd just like to say that I'm really pleased to see that we've got such a balanced programme of additional help around the cost of living crisis. I think this is a really well thought out programme, and I wanted to add my thanks to the team that's put it together. I mean, one of the elements of this is that it's clearly a holistic approach to the cost of living crisis itself, but also combining that with some environmental considerations, for example, and issues of food supply. And one of the points that seems to focus on that most is the South Cambridgeshire Sustainable Food Network element. So I just wondered if I could ask 1 or 2 questions about that, just to tease out some more details, really. So, I mean, first of all, I was wondering if we know how close we are to meeting the need for food banks, if we have any idea what the need is, whether, in terms of need that we understand, or whether we believe that there's a lot of additional need that we haven't yet actually seen yet. And whether I think the proposal was for, was it five additional food banks? So I wondered whether that, we feel that that's meeting the need we understand, or how that balances against our understanding of the need for food banks. Also, I wanted to ask about the strategy for them. So is the idea to provide a more even geographical coverage across the district, or I wondered if perhaps there's another strategy there. And I also wondered if there was an element of training or policy development associated with this with the food network, because clearly this is an expansion of something that was initially quite targeted, food banks and individual provision. But this policy is becoming much more broad. It's integrating local food supply, local producers, and bringing in environmental considerations. So I wonder if there's going to be an element of this project which could provide training for the people involved, or will establish policies, for example. I don't know how consistent food banks are in the way that they operate, and whether or not we want them to be consistent. Also, there are a number of smaller food banks that are not on the South Cambs website. They've just sprung up in villages as community efforts to address the cost of living crisis. And I wondered whether these had been considered at all in the strategy. And if we thought there was a need to involve them at all, perhaps we as ward members and the parish councils might be a way of getting in touch with those if it's seen as a useful thing to integrate them with the strategy. So yeah, just a few questions there. Any comments on any of that? I'd be very interested to hear more. Thank you.
Yeah, Gareth, straight away, yeah. Yeah, thought so, yeah. Gareth.
Thank you, Councillor. Really good points. I'll try and address those. I think I've got those jotted down. So, in regard to need, really difficult. I think we've kind of had that through the conversation. in regard to trying to predict need and the expansion of need that we've seen in the figures from sort of Cambridge City Food Bank, which we're right doesn't just serve the city, is across South Cambridgeshire as well. But I think that with our geography, those kind of village-based sort of hyperlocal support is really vital to us. And I think in regards to a strategy that we're looking to suggest here is more of one looking at kind of gap analysis, so kind of mapping the data that we hold around areas that potentially suggest that there's a greater need based on the data that we hold against the geography of the food banks that we're aware of, including those kind of more village-based operations. So I think in regards to any gaps that we've got in our knowledge of those village-based kind of food banks, we're always really do welcome parish and member input into making sure that we're aware of those. We did a lot during the COVID pandemic to map those, but it's really difficult to kind of stay on top of those because of lots of things kind of happen within communities. And I think in regards to kind of the way that they operate, there's obviously a big difference between sort of trust food banks and the way that they operate and through the voucher systems that work, and more local food banks that sometimes work in a very different way. And I think that's okay, and I think that we've all said that probably all the communities that you serve are very different and they work in different ways. But definitely there's things that can be learned, and I think a lot of the things that we do within the communities team is to try and share that knowledge across the district and beyond to make sure that we're taking that kind of best practice. We've kind of done that during lots of different things, including the pandemic and other pieces of work and community safety partnership as well. So I think that there is things that we can learn. I think I've jotted down and I'll take away that kind of training and policies element, but that's probably not something that we've thought about in detail at the moment. And I think I've said that in regard to the smaller food banks that work more locally, it is something that we've considered. And I think when we're talking about food banks, I do think that particularly if we're thinking them being sort of sustainable into the future, I think that those very local village-based food banks, particularly where we've got a gap or we've got an area where perhaps the data is showing that perhaps deprivation is higher, I think that's the area where, as a district council, we've got real value that we can really kind of create the support and support communities to kind of take the best practice from other areas and replicate that across our area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hobray.
Great, yes, thank you very much for the answers. I mean, I think this is a really interesting part of our response, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing how it develops. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Bradman.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to remind members that the Trussell Trust continues to be my chair's charity. It was in 2021-22, and at the point when I could have changed the charity, I chose to continue with the Trussell Trust because it looked to me as if the need for their service was going to only get greater, and that has transpired to be the case. So just to remind members. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I have no more hands or anything written down in relation to that item. Looking all around, screen as well, so therefore we are done. So we have managed, with 10 minutes to spare, to meet the 3:45-minute deadline. I think we took longer on that item, slightly shorter on the first item, but we have managed to do so very efficiently. So before we move on that item, I think we just need to make sure that we have noted the further support for cost of living crisis for South Cambridgeshire residents. So we just affirm that we are happy to note the item. Agreed. It's a very quiet affirm, but I did hear it from everyone. Thank you very much. Which just brings us to our final two things, which is item 9, which is our work programme. Myself and Councillor Cone and Ian Senior have had a number of meetings in the last few weeks since our last Scrutiny Overview meeting with various cabinet members and senior officers and others to make sure that we are putting together our work programme going forward. And as you can see there from the agenda, We have items related to the equality scheme, update and progress report, Ukraine update. In April, there is the issue regarding new collection rounds. If I could just flag up that that one is a definite work in progress in terms of discussion and what is happening. It's one of those items that could go from being a 1-minute item to something that could collectively lead to this committee spending 3 weeks in this room having the conversation. And a form of somewhere between those two will be found. And obviously members will have the opportunity to be involved in that. And then as we move through June, we have the quarter four performance report and such like. So those are our items that are coming up on our work programme. We are seeking to try to schedule as far ahead as possible. And obviously that relates to the council's forward plan. So those are the things there that we are publishing, and we're trying to make sure that we fill ahead as much as possible. You can see that we've also scheduled things right through to October and November at this stage. And we've also started to put things down such as civil parking enforcement and others that we will put in at an appropriate time. So unless there are any questions related to that item, I shall move on. Right. Okay, so, sorry, my apologies, I'm on the wrong screen. And our next meeting is the 28th of March 2023 at 5:20 p.m, if we can note that. And then just before I move on, I will, as always, turn to Ian and say, Ian, is there anything that I have not covered, not mentioned, or not done that you would like to flag to the committee? Okay, thank you very much. And if I just feel I wish to apologise for the fact that in the first 10 minutes of the meeting, I seemed to not quite be on the ball. Not entirely sure what I was doing there, ignoring councillors and other such things. I wish to apologise for that as chair. I feel that once we got going, we seemed to be absolutely fine. So thank you very much, everyone, as always, for your attendance. And with the time at